So welcome back, everyone, to part two of my conversation with Ike Eisenmann. He is definitely our VIP and a well-known and beloved Disney child star. So we're going to continue our conversation that we'll pick up from where we were in part one. But welcome back, Ike. It's great to have you again.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be back.
One of your Disney projects that I just love, and I'm sure I saw it even before Escape to Witch Mountain, was The Sky's the Limit. And that, for people that don't know, that was on The Wonderful World of Disney, a two-parter, as I always say, 2 episodes.
Right. Yeah.
And there were a number of great character actors in that particular project. So what was it like to work with Pat O'Brien and Lloyd Nolan?
It was absolutely extraordinary. I worked on The Sky's the Limit, and it's interesting that you say that, because yes, if you saw it when it originally aired, it aired before Witch Mountain came to theaters, because we filmed Escape to Witch Mountain in April and May of 1974, and it wasn't released until I think it was March of 75.
Right.
I was offered the 3-year contract while I was shooting Witch Mountain, and then it all got finalized in afterwards. And once it was finalized, they offered me my first project right away, which was The Sky's the Limit. And we were moving into the summer of 1974, and that's usually when Disney would shoot the Wonderful World of Disney projects with young people, because actually during the summer is the only time you can work when you're out of school on summer vacation. You don't have to do the 3 hours of school. So then they can work you for the full 9 hours a day, which is, exhausting enough as it is. But actually, I found it a whole lot easier to do, because when I'm on set, my breaks were breaks. I didn't have to go to school, and I got to spend, time hanging out and relaxing and then going back to work. But Pat O'Brien and Lloyd Nolan were just, oh my gosh, they were such amazing men, beautiful people. They were so kind to me. And I knew them both from, all the old movies I watched. I wouldn't say I was in awe, but I was certainly awed to be around him and spend time with him. And he talked to me a lot. We had a lot of conversations. And one day, sitting there on an extended break, somehow Newt Rockne came up, and he went into the monologue. He actually monologued for me right in front of me. And I was just, my jaw dropped. I thought, my gosh, not only is he performing this for me, but he remembers it, because it's not a short monologue. And part of what I adored about working with these stars was that they adored what they did. And they were no different from me. They loved their work. They loved to work. They were very professional. There was not a diva amongst them. I might have had 1 or 2 awkward experiences with actors over the course of my career, but they loved to work, and they worked hard. And yeah, we had a lot of amazing character actors on that film. It was not just those two, but Jeanette Nolan had a part in it. Alan Hale Jr. had a part in it. Ben Blue, who was an old, I think he was he might have been a silent film comedian, but I know he was a comedian from, the 30s. So they had this whole group of movie stars from the old days that were just playing all these various parts in it, and it was just everywhere you looked, and they're all hanging out, and they all tell each other stories. They do tell each other's stories, and I can't remember a single one. I wish I had the energy to take notes, back in those days. But just listening to them all talk to each other was just such a privilege. I mean, it was such a privilege. And that was such a fun show for me to do, because like I said, I was not a very social child with other kids, and I was the only child in that show. So I got the attention of everyone around me, and I didn't have to share it with anybody.
Yes, amazing.
And I truly love that. And it was about an airplane, and I loved airplanes, so built model airplanes, and just to work with it was a reproduction, obviously, but of this old biplane that was on set all the time. I got to pour over it and touch it and sit in it, and it's just it's like, my God, for a kid that loves all these things, I got to spend weeks having fun. All the Disney projects are special to me, but that one really just stood out in so many ways. And kind of just going back to living the dream. Watching The Wonderful World of Disney on Sunday nights and seeing that, seeing the title come up, Tinkerbell come up and hit that wand, and having it explode and announcing the next show was overwhelming to me. But then to see it happen and see my name come up was almost more emotionally impactful to me than actually doing the project. And I still, as much as I've talked about this and written about it and exercised it from me, it still hits me in that place where it's just magical. This is a rarefied experience, for so many people, and for me especially. It wasn't just my job. I had a love for it, and then I got to do it, and that was really amazing. So I ended up that was the first Disney thing I saw that I was in before I saw Escape to Witch Mountain. Because the time delay is big when it comes to movies. For TV shows is very different. They can get them out faster, but they tend to measure them, when they're going to air them. But it was interesting how it laid out chronologically.
Yeah,
wonderful experience.
That must have been amazing. And
yeah,
Escape to Witch Mountain involved special effects, so that seems like it always takes longer. To achieve before it's ready to be shown in the theaters. But that's so wonderful to hear your story about seeing yourself in excuse me, in the wonderful world of Disney. And you had obviously seen yourself on television before. You had done other shows like Gunsmoke, but to see yourself as part of that wonderful world.
Yeah, I have seen myself. It was never anything I was incredibly comfortable with, but that projection, when you spend so much time, and people talk about you talk about vision boards and envisioning things and envisioning your future. I had projected myself into these things so many times that by the time I saw myself, it was just like, it was almost jarring, because I thought, okay, wow, yes, there I am, and there it is.
Yeah.
And look what I'm doing. And did I do okay? And of course I was very critical of myself, but pleased with what I saw, most of the time. But yeah, there's still something a little jarring about it. But seeing it, and of course this is the way I describe it as well. Every time I see these things, it puts me back on set more so than I can't objectify it enough. You just kind of watch it as a piece. And one of the things that this is a bit of a segue, but I had to do in writing my memoir. I'm fortunate enough that I have all of my Disney projects on Betamax tape. And that's one of our shows we're doing on Pop Culture Retro podcast, is talking about the format wars and Betamax and the old days of that.
Great.
We owned a home video recording system going all the way back to the very beginning. So we started to collect everything that I did every time it came on, because it was part of the professional experience, to have them to be demo tapes and all that kind of stuff. So I have this rather vast collection. I do all of these. I point to my closet because they're all right over here. So I have Sky's the Limit, Secret of the Pond, Fremont and the Mountain Man, and Shadow of Fear, all of them on tape. And I had to watch them over and over and over and over again to write my memoir, to put myself back at that time to cull the memories. And so I kind of got a little bit more used to watching myself more currently than I did when I was a child. But that was an incredible honor, and I'm still not over it.
I love it. This is so fascinating to hear on so many levels. And one of the things is, for a long time, I mean, I always would think about these things. I would see somebody like you in something, and then they would do something else. And I guess it's my analytical mind, I always thought, event A led to event B, led to event C. And of course, it's not as cut and dried as all that. So for a long time, I assumed that you did The Sky's the Limit, and that because of that, you were cast in Escape to Witch Mountain, you know,
Ah,
because
yes. Sure.
obviously you were so good. But see, you're filling in the history of it all for all of us, Ike. So this is great to hear. But I do have to say, I think one of the reasons I did love The Sky's the Limit is I always liked stories where there was one child with adults, because I'm
Ah,
more and more I'm realizing how much we're similar. I felt the same way as a child. I was very shy, and I got along much better with adults, I thought, anyhow. I don't know what the adults thought. But it was just easier to relate to them and talk to them. So even with something like The Wizard of Oz, if you think about The Wizard of Oz, that's one child among all these
yes,
adults. And even though
very much.
the
Yeah.
adults are, you know, fantastic creatures in a lot of cases, that's that kind of a story too. And of course, I always loved The Wizard of Oz. So
Oh, I'd join you in that. Yeah.
yeah, we're not alone, certainly, but that, I think that was one aspect of it, is it's that child among all these adults. So I always like stories like that. And even Escape to Witch Mountain is really like that too, even though there are other children in it. It's really about,
Hmm.
especially as it goes on, it's about the two children, you know, with the adults. And I'm telling you, you were in it. So
Yeah.
so
No, that's very true. Yeah.
so you had mentioned Eddie Albert, and I do have, so first of all, for everyone watching, Escape to Witch Mountain, I think, has a very important place in Disney history, because it is one of the best films of the post-Walt era of the 1970s. We all have our love for all the Disney films on one level or another, but some of them are definitely better than others in the 1970s, especially. And you could
Yeah.
tell that was
I agree.
you could tell that was something different. It was different. It was a different kind of a story for Disney. And you mentioned the director. They obviously hired him to give something different, because of his background. And they went out of their way to hire, because they had their kind of stock company of directors, probably some of
Hmm.
whom you worked with, but they obviously went out of they were thinking outside the box. So
Yes.
it stands out for that reason, but also because it's a superior film of the era. So you're certainly part of it. But one reason I think of, when I think of Escape to Witch Mountain, when I think of Escape to Witch Mountain, I often think of Eddie Albert. He does come to mind. He was such a good actor. He did, as you said earlier, he did so much more than Green Acres, although he's wonderful on Green Acres. Even like some of the things that they had in the trailers for Escape to Witch Mountain, where they would have like one line of his, like, you kids have these fantastic powers. He is so real. He is so present. And there's one scene where you ask him a question and he's so genuine, you would think that he kind of thinks about it for a minute and answers. And that's where you really see acting, because obviously he knows as an actor, he knows the answer, he knows what he's going to say. He really makes it look like he's thinking about it. And he's so fantastic. So do you have any stories about working with Eddie Albert, or any insights?
He was, in a way, unexpected for me, because I had, at that point in my career, I hadn't worked with a method actor. And I considered him, by the way he approached it, to being a method actor. Because we had one of the wonderful things we were able to do with Witch Mountain, for the most part, and I say this for the most part, but the scenes with him, John wanted to shoot the film in script order as much as possible. And, about half the movie visually takes place on location, or maybe 2/3. The other third of it or more our interiors. And, the way the production schedule went, we were shooting in Carmel, California, Palo Alto, and surrounding areas. And then we came back to the studio and shot all the interiors. And so we shot some things out of order, but very little with Eddie was shot out of order, except for some of the scenes in the Winnebago when we're driving and essentially escaping. So we were able to start with the beginning of his character and work with him as it evolved. And it was a little surprising to me because he in the film, he starts off as this really angry, bitter curmudgeon that, of course, doesn't want anything to do with the kids. And he's already yelling at the gas station attendant, making himself known right away. And what surprised me when we first started to work with him is he was that way all the time. I mean, he was grumpy. He didn't talk to anybody. He barely talked to Kim and I. When we were introduced, he just sort of said hi and moved away. And I didn't know what to think of it, really, in the beginning. But then as we continued to work, he started to soften up right along with his character. And then all of a sudden we're hanging out more, and he said hello in the mornings, asked me how I was, and we'd run lines and we'd do scenes together. And it wasn't harder to work with him that way, but I quickly started to learn that that's how he approached his work. And I just remember thinking, good grief. I'd heard the term method actor before, which is someone who stays in character the whole time, whether they're working or not. And I used to think, my gosh, I'm so tired doing my job when I do it. I can't imagine staying that way all day long and maintaining that kind of energy. So I didn't relate to it, but it certainly made it interesting to work with him from that perspective. And then by the end, especially, even the last scene in the film, which is on the mountaintop when we, run off with Uncle Benet and get in the flying saucer and take off, we were all kind of weeping on set, and we weren't even done shooting yet because we still had all the studio work to do. So we really forged a nice professional relationship, and it was a warm, just a warm personal relationship on set. He even took me out to lunch one day at the studio just to talk to me, just to learn about me. And he wanted to share some things with me he was a very big environmentalist, and I don't know if this is 100% true, but I believe he was such a big environmentalist and such an influence on so many organizations that Earth Day was founded on his birthday. I think they chose his birthday because he was so involved with that. And he wanted just to impart some of the bigger worldly concepts and wisdoms to me to contemplate as a young person, and I found it fascinating and very generous. And he was just a really kind and thoughtful and much deeper human, and which so many performers are.
The minute you said he was a method actor, I was like, oh, okay, because he is at a different level than you usually see in a lot of Disney movies. He's just at a different acting level, and that was really needed for this sci-fi type story. He's in the last section of the movie where now all these incredible things are happening, and we're really finding out that you're from another planet and all that, and with the flying saucer, etc. So you really need his complete. He's completely believable and is really in the moment.
Well, I think he did something very difficult as an actor. For me, the things I found most difficult to do, and you'd think they'd be the overly emotional scenes, or what I always found the hardest was when you had to bridge, a major suspension of disbelief for the audience as the character that's communicating this. When we first revealed to him that we weren't stranded on a ship in the ocean, we were in a spaceship, he somehow managed to internalize that as an actor and as the character in a way that made you believe he believed it without question. He didn't stop and say, "What are you talking about, spaceship? What are you, crazy kids? Are you nuts? That's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard." And on top of just absorbing the telekinesis show that we put on for him when we first meet him by, Kim starting the RV, or Tia starting the RV.
The engine will start now.
Without thinking, and then me running the motorcycle off the cliff, without on its own. He just managed to accept those things and accept these two children for really who they were, which I think is part of the powerful message that disenfranchised children, well, any child that watched it that had any feelings of inadequacy, that wanted to be just accepted for who they were, had not just us representing them, but they had this amazingly caring adult that just did it without thinking and without putting the children down. And it really wasn't, it was on the page in the script, but then when I saw him perform that, I was just like, oh my God, that's the thing that got me about what he did. And in reviewing it and going back and watching it again, of course, the older I get, the more I learn about these things over the course of my life. I go back and I watch that film and I think, God, those moments are really special, because they could have landed really poorly, and I think the film would have suffered as a result. So, yeah, in many ways, and at that level, I don't know, I can't imagine he was screen tested for it. I'm sure he was just asked to be in it, but they made a really, really good choice.
His character was completely different in the book, so they sort of created that character from scratch, as it were. Have you ever read the original book?
Yeah, I've read it. I've read it a few times, actually. I read it back when we did the film, just to understand where it came from.
Great.
Yeah. And then I read it more recently in the last few years. I've read it again. It's a very interesting. It's much darker in so many ways, and yeah, the Jason O'Day character is very different. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's very fascinating that the screenwriter came up with this different character for whatever reason, and then the casting is so wonderful because it's really Eddie Albert, the actor. We've both mentioned Green Acres several times, so maybe he wasn't the first one who would come to your mind if you're thinking about him in Green Acres. But if you're thinking about him, the actor, boy, he delivers. And I really remember being struck by that one the first time I saw Escape to Witch Mountain. He's so different. But of course, I was already aware of him and from some of his other projects. And I'm like, well, he's an actor. But more and more, I'm struck. I really think he is almost the keystone of the movie, because he is the one that really makes it believable. And he's so different than the character. Here's your ally, here's someone, your advocate, here's somebody who's helping the children, as opposed to the other adults that we've seen. Donald Pleasance and Ray Milland are obviously the villains. So it's a different kind of role, and they're just in a different, they're just different characters. You had mentioned to me in a previous conversation that you were an artist and even wanted to be a Disney animator. So here you were at the Disney Studios. Did you get to meet any of the Disney animators? Did you get to see any of the behind the scenes stuff as they were working on, I guess it would have been The Rescuers at that time, and other projects?
I did not get that privilege. What I did have access to was the animation building. And the hallways back then, it's three stories, and all the hallways, and it's a deep building. It's bigger than it looks like when you see pictures of it from just the studio, which I know that but they used to have, and they moved a lot of this artwork, I think, to the new animation building. I remember seeing some of it there when I had the very rare privilege of actually working there on a project many, many, many years later. But all the halls were lined with original artwork and cells and development drawings going all the way back to Steamboat Willie and Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and it was stuff that's published everywhere, but to be able to see the originals, I mean, and pastels from Fantasia, you know, from the pastoral sequence, and just to, I was constantly overwhelmed, and I would go through there on my lunch breaks, because of course we're working on, you know, on the soundstage there, and you know, for people who don't know the logistics or the layout of a studio, I mean, it's very small and tight together. There's like one little street and then a little turn, and you've got stage 2 and 3, and then right there is the animation building, and there was no restriction to go in and out at all. And I just took a chance one day and went in and was so blown away that I was late back to the set and had to make sure I was wearing a watch. I took a watch to work, so that when I went to lunch, I could go eat really fast, and then I would check my watch, and I would spend my time going up and down the halls all the way to the top floor repeatedly just to consume the original artwork. Because, you know, it's one thing to see it in print, and then it's something else to just see it right there in front of you. And I was endlessly fascinated with that. But no, I didn't get to meet any of the animators. I didn't get to see them working because doors were closed. It's very walled off, and I would never consider, without being taken there, you know, crossing that border. And to be honest with you, as curious as I was, it just didn't occur to me to say, gosh, could I meet somebody, or could I see somebody working, or anything like that. I you know, as much access as I had, I felt like that was taking things perhaps a step too far.
Yeah,
but
I understand.
But I did get that opportunity, and they just, it was a semi-permanent museum show that hadn't changed between Escape to Witch Mountain and Return from Witch Mountain, which was 3 years later, you know. And every time I worked in a show, I went and walked those halls to consume it again. And then they would have a little section where they would have whatever project they were working on, they would have some new material up that they would rotate. So that was still incredibly special, and beyond intimidating for a young artist.
Well, I know the feeling, because I would do the same thing. I would go to the animation building, and I would just spend just the longest time poring over every single thing on the walls. And that was, I mean, now we take for granted all these art books and these coffee table books that produce so much of this beautiful, beautiful art from the Disney vaults. But then there were some books, but not as many as there are now. So it was even more of a treat. Now, you'll be happy to know that they still have that, all that. They probably have changed some of it and taken some of it out, as you said, but they still have the animation building, the original one, with the art in the hallways. And it's even it's even a little bit more sophisticated in terms of some signage and things that tell you about it, thanks to the Walt Disney Archives. So
outstanding.
It's a great treat and a privilege to be able to walk those halls. And speaking of books, I know you have. I can see you have this very book in the background.
Yes, right there.
And you and I have talked previously about what a great importance this was to both of us. This particular book, with its, I don't know, just opening this at random for people who might not be familiar with it. All this great Disney art, and taken seriously in a coffee table art book. There had been one in the 40s, but it was not as beautiful as this one. And I even have, you and I had talked about this too, I even have the original volume. People are going to say, what is that? Well, there was this Mickey Mouse, as you know, Ike, there was this Mickey Mouse cutout here, and a beautiful, clear, almost like a cell-like cover that said the art of Walt Disney, and Mickey Mouse was painting the Walt Disney signature. This volume of mine is so well loved and so well used,
my gosh,
that it's practically falling apart. And I still have the elements of the cover somewhere, but I mean, it's just incredible.
That stuff just always blew me away. And yes, I have that edition. Mine is in better shape than yours because Mickey's still glued to the front. I still have the acetate or whatever it is, if it's a celluloid cover on it with all the original stuff. It's cracking, but it's still there. I have it on a high shelf in a special place so that it's well protected. And this one was meant to replace it so that I could still go through it without degrading it anymore.
Yeah.
But actually, you went through yours more than I went through mine by the condition of it. I can tell. So
yeah. Well,
but gosh, what a special volume, especially for anyone with a visual art inclination. It was overwhelming for me, and I learned so much, and my appreciation for what these artists can do deepened, with every single examination. So yeah, I love it.
Well, let us not forget that there is a chapter on live action movies in it. So the art of Walt Disney included live action movies, and you became part of that. You became a big part of that. So I have 1,000 more questions for you. So I think including non-Disney projects like Cross Creek, which, gosh, I just love that movie. I cannot tell you how many times I saw Cross Creek because whenever it was on cable or I watched it, maybe because it's about a writer. So maybe that was one of its appeals. And
I'm so glad to hear that because it's a small film in so many ways. It's an art film in so many ways, and it's not on everybody's radar. So those people who've seen it, I've come to really enjoy their appreciation of it, and having revisited it now after having done some serious writing, I find it to have been probably one of the very best, I think, representations of the struggle and the creative process of finding your voice. It's really amazing and incredibly well done. And we will have to save that conversation for another time. That would be wonderful to dig into. But I'm so glad to hear that you enjoy it that much, because I love being a part of that, even though I had a small part, but there's a story to that too that we'll have to cover another time.
Well, I would love to hear it and love to hear more about the behind the scenes of that film. Part of that movie's appeal for me is that you are in it, because I would say I would watch it and go, oh, of course, Ike from the Disney films. There he is. That's great to see, and great to see that you were going on with your career. So we will definitely have to have you back and talk about Cross Creek and many other Disney things that we didn't even get to. And Ike, it's a great honor to have you, and I cannot thank you enough for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. And as I told you at the beginning, I can go on and on and on. So I think it's appropriate that perhaps we pick this up another time. So I hope your viewers find it interesting. And I always have a great time talking about these things. So I appreciate your interest and give me a chance to relive some memories. So thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. So for everyone watching, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time with another VIP visit.